shadows creeping, deep in the woods, secrets lay sleeping. Oh, yeah. Squatch-D TV, they're on the case. Steve and Chris, no mystery they can't face. Busting hoaxes, exposing lies. They're the champs of the Bigfoot Mystery. Mystery, mystery. Bringing truth, science, and clarity. Clarity. Squatch-D TV, they're the real deal. Uncovering the truth, it's time to reveal. Squatch-D TV, take us on your quest. Find the legend, put the rumors to rest. Late at night, shadows creeping, deep in the woods, secrets lay sleeping. Oh yeah, Squatch-D TV, they're on the case. Steve and Chris, no mystery they can't face. Busting hoaxes, exposing lies. They're the champs of the Bigfoot Mystery. Bringing truth, science, and clarity. Squatch-D TV, they're the real deal. Uncovering the truth, it's time to reveal.
Welcome to Squatch-D TV, where the truth is first before all else. Join your hosts, veteran investigator, TV personality, and author Steve Kulls, and from the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Project and the Kentucky Fried Fixes channel, Chris Bennett. Sit back and prepare to take yourself on a journey with the longest-running Bigfoot podcast, Squatch-D TV. Here are your hosts, Steve and Chris.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatch-D TV for today's date, June 16th, 2024. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective, Steve Kulls, along with my co-host right down there, Mr. Chris Bennett. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Steve, it's good to see you, man. Hope you're feeling okay today. How's the neck?
Yeah, it was a rough week, I'll tell you that much, but Steve is feeling much better, man. He's on board. And
that is great. And right out of the chute, was you going to say Happy Father's Day to you, bud, and Happy Father's Day to all our fathers out there?
Happy Father's Day, all the fathers out there. Yeah. Still not really good to go for traveling too far with the old neck yet.
That's the thing. You don't want to push it, right?
And the meds kind of like I had to be very straightforward with them this week. Probably another week or two, I got to be very straightforward with the way I'm living and not do too much. So I know I have an appearance coming up in Rochester next week. Looks like I'm not going to make that because I need to save my energy and save my goodness for that marathon that's coming up called the Hocking Hills Bigfoot Festival.
Oh, yeah. So, that's going to be a great one.
Yeah. So
Hocking
I got
Hills.
And the good news is I'm feeling back to myself again, which is awesome. If you notice, I'm talking a lot. I noticed that in the last few shows last month, I was talking a little bit slower than I normally do and not as clear as I normally do. But now I'm very crisp and very on it. My mind is a lot better and a lot quicker than what it was. So that's all good to go. And
that's on you too. You should have been monitoring that sugar level and that blood glucose level closer.
Well, I didn't have meds to take care of it, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, well,
unfortunately, but now I'm all caught up. I got everything. I got everything I'm supposed to do. I'm doing. So that's
good.
All
good.
But anyway, we got one heck of a show tonight too. And before we do that, let's get our roll call out and done with because very, very important we get that done and get on to our show tonight because we got one hell of a show for you. We got quite the discussion going on. And Chris and I were having quite the discussion before the show.
Yeah, sir. We were almost running late because we were talking about the show before the show. And, this is one of my favorites. But let's go ahead and do the.
Yep. Okay, first in today, Walter Kroll. Hello, Walter. Good to see you. Ristel. Hartgrove Mitchum. Still waiting on those questions, sir. Get those questions to me. Buttworm. Patrick Collins. Daniel Weeks. Patty Lindsay. Good to see you, Patty. Here for a live, always watch the review. Well, welcome to the live show.
Great.
Welcome to the chat. Enjoy yourself. Make yourself at home. Daniel Weeks, Michael Williams, good to see you.
Michael.
Traveling with Jim. Jim, my old buddy. How you doing? Jay Carey, good to see you. Lance Windsor, hello. David Parker, what's going on? I've already said hi to Bristol. Pete H, good to see you. Ammon, Chris. And dropping in my like, and I'll listen in the morning, so we'll catch you on the flip side, Ammon, Chris.
All right. Catch you on the replay.
Hey, Don Gumow Jr. Is in the house. Jen, hello, Jen. You've been a traveling woman this weekend. I wish I could have made it this Saturday, but fortunately I just had too much going on with the old health, and hopefully that's on the mend. And there he is, David Gray in the house. Hello, David. Good to see you, brother. We'll be seeing you soon. Jay Fritz is also here. Jay, good to see you. Jeff D. Smith. Hello, Jeff D. Bamboo Soldier. Hello, Bamboo. Good to see you.
That's a new one.
And
welcome.
And he's like, right on. You're right on the money there, Bamboo. We're going to be doing a deep dive on that sucker tonight. So,
let's see.
And we're gonna show you some stuff that probably you've never seen before.
Yeah. Some of this stuff is going to be, I guarantee, 100% new. Just Steve came in. Hello, just Steve. Welcome.
Finding the trackway. It's Merry Platypus Day. So there we have it. We have it tonight.
But we're going to do tonight. The Albert Ostman's encounter happened 100 years ago this year. So
100 years old. So we're taking a deep dive in a case that's 100 years old. Now, before we start, I just want to say welcome to all the new members. We've had a hell of a lot of new members. Over 130 new members this month.
We appreciate you guys.
Maybe even 140.
Still counting.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, tonight we are looking at a story that to me is an enigma, and it's something that we've always been accepted because we've always accepted this story because of what John Green wrote about this, how he was always consistent. But one has to realize that as time progresses and investigations are always pragmatic, they take time. Truth always comes out with time. It may not be 50 years. I mean, it took how many years for the surgeon photo in Loch Ness to come out, the real truth? So I'm sorry if I'm looking away. I got my camera in kind of a new position today, kind of out of the way so I can see my screen. So I apologize if I'm looking away.
Well, yeah, the way this is set up too, it's kind of weird. I know during the show, and I apologize, guys, for this, but I know it looks like I'm watching a game of ping pong. Because if I'm looking at the chat room, I'm looking over here, and if I'm looking at Steve, I'm looking over here. So it's just like boom, boom, boom. But we work with what we got. Okay.
Oh, and hello to Pat Fisher. Said hello. I wish YouTube notifications worked. My apologies, Pat. I did schedule this show a little bit later than normal today. I will try to get them a little earlier once that's my fault. So I apologize.
Well, I don't think it's your fault every time, Steve. Sometimes the notifications thing doesn't show up until after the show.
Yeah. But anyway, getting back to this, is it? I mean, John Green, one of the legends in this field, but let's face it, the available information they had when they were doing this. I mean, John Green interviewed him in the late 50s,
1957,
late 50s. So when, if you think about it, I'm going to move this just a little bit here. When you think about that, you have to wonder a lot of times, how accurate can it be? Because people can, not necessarily by omission. Hey, Mick is in the house. I mean, it's not intentional, but some of the information is not, well, we're going to find that out real quick. We're going to talk about all that. So, again, we're going to hold questions till the end of our little discussion here, and then we can ask away. I think that's a little more proper way to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
But I do, I will say this. Nobody is infallible. Nobody is beyond mistake. I'm not. Chris is not. Certainly John Green wasn't. Peter Byrne, Renee DeHinden, et cetera, Grover Krantz. And I'm sure there are missteps that they have made that we're discovering now. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the Bosberg Cripplefoot, that was found by Ivan Marks, for crying out loud. Right. So, some people say, oh, well, I really think that, it's kind of the same argument and the same template people say about Todd Standing. They try to say, oh, well, he may have faked that, but I really believe he started, no, he didn't. He did not. So just because if somebody has that ability to hoax or spin a yarn or tell a tale, they will pull that anytime they feel deemed necessary.
We did do a show many years ago about the Bosberg Cripple track, and Steve actually came up with the photograph of that track, the one they cast in the snow. So if you're interested in that, go back and find it. I don't remember what number show it was, but it had the photograph that in the snow that they cast, the footprint.
I actually believe in Don Hunter and Renee DeHinden's book, Sasquatch. I believe it was page 254. Mm-hmm. That's how much I can remember now. Mm-hmm. I believe it was page 254 that described the finding of that track by Ivan Marks. Mm-hmm. That he pulled off anyway, we're getting on sidetracked. I don't want to get sidetracked.
Okay, we'll leave Ivan for another day. But I just wanted to throw that in case somebody was interested in it. They could look up the show.
Sure. But the bottom line is that nobody is beyond reproach. And as time goes on, investigations grow. And going back 100 years is really a lot interesting. Not saying that we found the bombshell, but, a few years back, I did do an investigation that was 40 years old, and that was The Creature by Jan Clement. And I did come up with a bombshell of the Library of Congress having the actual pseudonym who Jan Clement really was, which was the publisher, John Tomical. So, very super important that we note that. So anyway, obviously this story started in the late 50s with these articles about Osman making the claims he was kidnapped by a Sasquatch. Chris, it's you know the story way better than I do.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of articles that you can find online. The first one is from 1957, and it's talking about Albert Osman claims he was captured and held captive by Sasquatch. And they did do a revisit in the same newspaper of that article in 1964 when they were describing Osman had been giving local talks, or some of the local, I can't remember the club's name. They had a local club there, and they invited Osman to come speak. And he spoke and told of his encounter, and then he answered questions at the end of his encounter story. But, sometime in 1957, John Green had interviewed Albert Osman. And that's when, he got 15 minutes worth of fame there, but nothing else. No money. The only thing at that time, I think the footage that they made, when they revisited for, what was it, In Search Of, or it was one of those old shows from the 70s. They showed Green talking with Osman. Correct. And but this is one of the good ones it's one of my favorites that I had been looking at for the years because of the descriptions of the creatures and some of the behaviors he described are just too spot on to be, in my opinion, too spot on to be made up. Figments of the imagination. Some of the things about Osman described about the size, right. Some of the eating habits, very interesting, very interesting. But while I was researching, I was going to do a short video on the Albert Ostman to mark the 100-year anniversary. But while I was researching this video, to do the video, I found an article that debunked the Albert Ostman captured by a Sasquatch claim. And as I was reading through it, I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is terrible. And so I sent a copy of that to Steve, and we were talking about it for a while the other day. And Steve did a deep dive when he started finding some information. Because according to the article, and it was perfectly fine work. Don't get me wrong. It was perfectly good work.
We do have the article up. We can read some of that. But why don't you discuss a little bit, Chris, about the Ostman encounter itself for those that don't know it?
You want to go to this one, or where you?
No.
Sorry.
Just tell the story of Ostman. Recap the story of Ostman for the audience.
Yeah.
So it's not on a slide.
At this time, Ostman claimed he had been working, and he had went on a small vacation. So he took a vacation, and he was going to do some gold mining. And he had heard from a local Indian that there was a abandoned gold mine, or a ghost gold mine, whatever, somewhere around the head of Toba Inlet. He spoke with a local Indian there, and the Indian told him about an old man that would go out, he would come back into town, and he would drink heavily. He was a party dude, and he would quickly drink up all his gold, his money he went and mined, and he would leave, and then just a few days later, he would come back with another bag of gold. So the fact that he had a gold mine was interesting to Ostman. At one trip, one time he left and he didn't come back. Well, the Indian who told Ostman about this said that some thought he was killed by a Sasquatch. Well, Ostman didn't know what a Sasquatch was. He'd never heard of it. So he asked the Indian, what kind of animal is a Sasquatch? Well, the Indian replied and told him it's not really an animal. It's a tribe of hairy giant people that live in the mountains. So there's not very many of them left, but they're there. And of course, Ostman was skeptical. He didn't consider that credible. You know, he thought it was just old Indian tales. So he said, well, there may have been, people like hairy people like that, many hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, whatever. But I don't think there'll be any there today. So sure enough, Ostman pays the Indian to take him to the head of Toba Inlet. He starts camping out. He's got an 80-pound pack of supplies. He's got his sleeping bag. He's got a 30-30 rifle. He's got some specialized mining equipment. One with his axe, he had a tool with a pick on one side and an axe head on the other. And that makes a lot of sense, for he's going looking for gold. He camps, after he leaves, the Indian told him he'd meet him back there in about 3 weeks. After he leaves the first campsite, he goes to another one, and I think he climbs several mountains, goes several miles in deep, stays there that one night, then he picks up and tries to find a better camp. 2 or 3 days later, he's at a different camp. And he describes it, there's a couple different ways. He describes the first one, he was 30 miles northeast. And another article, he described he was around 75 miles or so. So it's kind of difficult to pick out which, he didn't even know exactly where he was at. So Ostman started getting night visitors. Something was disturbing the things in his camp. And after about the third night, he decided he was going to wait up for it in his sleeping bag. Concerned that it could have been porcupines, he had put his boots in his sleeping bag with him because he said porcupines like to chew leather. Anyway, that night, while he's waiting up for his visitor, he falls asleep. The next thing he knows, he's getting picked up in his sleeping bag, and something had thrown him over his shoulder. He said he thought first he was on horseback, but he still had his rifle in with him, and he said he had his knife, but he couldn't get to it. He was going to try to cut his way out of the sleeping bag. But whatever it was carrying him, and he said he could feel his pack. So whatever it was, it also grabbed his pack. He could feel his pack bumping up against him, and he could also hear the cans rattling. So what time it was at night that he got picked up, he didn't know. But he did know that he was carried until about 4 a.m. the next morning. And he made some descriptions about the creature. He said every now and then, as it was going uphill and straining, it would let out a little cough every now and then. So he figured this is one of those Sasquatch things that Indian was talking about. That's got to be. So about 4 a.m., this creature takes him to a V-shaped pass, V-shaped valley with a small entrance, and lets him out. And as it starts getting daylight, he looks around and he's got 4 creatures around him. A mom and a dad and 2 younger ones, a boy and a girl. Osman stays with those creatures for about 6 days. He felt like he was being held captive because every time he went towards the entrance and exit, the V-shaped exit, the old man was standing there, and let's see, what was the words he used, Steve? Was Oka. He said the old man would say Oka, and try to, lead him back in. Well, after 6 days worth of time, he was starting to run out of food, and Osman came up with a plan. Now, this is a little bit stretching it. He said he'd remembered about a guy getting away from a bull by blinding it with snuff. And so he works out a little deal. And during this time he's being held captive, he's watching these creatures, and he's describing details. Now, the details that he gave inside the article, inside the written account, and there were some outside of the written account. I don't know if Steve wants me to talk about this one or not. But the ones he described inside his written account, things like, what do they eat? Well, he mentioned specifically conifer shoots. The little green, light green, yellow sprouts on the end of pine trees, new growth. They would eat those. Now, that kind of clicked with me. That's interesting because, gorillas tend to eat young foliage and stuff. There have been reports of these creatures eating stuff like that specifically. But anyway, let's move on. He's been there 6 days. He's been reporting all this activity. He decides to leave, even if he had to shoot his way out. Now, Osman was reluctant to shoot his way out in the beginning because he didn't know for certain his .30-30 rifle would stop the old man. The old man was, evidently around 8 feet tall, very large, barrel chest, he described. But as he was running out of food, he decided he was going to have to take the chance regardless. He had to leave, even if he had to shoot his way out. He comes up with concocts this wild plan about giving the old man a taste of snuff and then leaving the whole can out where the Sasquatch would have access to it. And the Sasquatch grabs the can of snuff, eats it up in one gulp, gets sick, and then grabs his pot of black coffee he's got brewing on the fire, drinks that down, and then makes some noises, grows deathly ill, and leaves, look in search of water, he supposes.
Right. And just let me interject here real quickly. There's some question about Don not remembering about the pack sack.
Yeah.
But it says clearly, I tried to reason out of what kind of animal this would be. I tried to get out I tried to get at my sheath knife and cut my way out, but I was in an almost sitting position.
Yes.
I could not get a hold of it, but the rifle was in front of me. I had a good hold of that and had no intention of letting that go. At times, I could feel my pack sack touching me, and I could feel the cans in the sack touching my back. So yes, he did mention that.
If I read, that's why I'm just kind of summarizing it, Steve. Right. If I read the whole thing, man, it'd be a half an hour.
Yes, correct. Yeah. There was a question about that in the chat about.
So yeah, Ostman made his escape. He ended up firing off one shot. The old lady chased him screaming. He fired one shot at a rock ledge or rock wall over her head, and she went back. So Ostman goes, a couple of days later, he's found on the Salmon Inlet by loggers, or he finds a logging group on the Salmon Inlet. And there he's rescued. And he didn't tell them, he says, about being captured by a Sasquatch or held captive because they would think he was probably crazy. And that's where his story is. So his story began at the head of Toba Inlet, and it ended at the Salmon Inlet at a logging camp.
Now, right now, we're just presenting the evidence, and we're going to come into some Athens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
As we continue on. So just hold the fort. We're not saying this story is real or not real at this point in time.
But this has always been one of my favorites, mostly because of the detailed descriptions he gives on behavior and the detailed descriptions he gave on the food sources.
And locations.
And the locations. The locations, there are varying occurrences in a couple of ways. The 30 miles to the 70 miles. That's a little, but if you think about it, this happened in 1924. He's trying to remember in 1957 how far he was in.
Right.
But he did get the direction northeast. So that helps a lot, especially today with Google Earth.
Right. So let's take a look at some Google Earth stuff. All right. There you go, Chris. What are we looking at here? This is the overview shot, is it not?
Yeah. First, let's see. At the top, I'll tell you what, Steve. Let me share a screen here. Let me share a screen because I want to be able to zoom in so they can get a better look.
I'm just going to advance through these slides. I'm going to advance down to this one.
Okay, that's a shot of the Salmon River and the Wedge Mountain shot. Okay, now hang on. I'm trying to share a screen here. Hang on. Oh, yes, there we go. Share. Okay. All right, is it up there now, Steve? I'm not looking at the thing now.
There it is.
Okay. So where Ostman's adventure began, he left Lund down here in British Columbia. And
zoom in a little bit more, Chris. There we go.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what we can do is
Lund.
We can do this.
Yeah, okay. He left Lund in British Columbia, and he hired an Indian guide to take him to the head of Toba Inlet. Now, Toba Inlet, keep zooming out a little bit.
And for those who are audio listeners here that stream us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox, all Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Amazon, you might want to check the video out on this if you want to see these maps and some of the graphics we're showing you tonight.
Yeah,
so.
That's really, really important. But where the Toba Inlet, now remember, he was taken to the head of Toba Inlet, not the mouth of Toba Inlet. Now, the Toba Inlet is up here on the Brim River, I think it is. And the head of the inlet is up here where at the source. Okay, the source of the water from Toba Inlet is where he ended up at. And his first night, he camped at a creek here at the head of Toba Inlet. And this is where Osman's adventure began. Now, I've got the location here. I know you probably can't see that, but it's on the map.
I would like to add, allegedly began.
Yeah, allegedly, yes. So from here, at the mouth of Toba Inlet, he stayed one night with the Indian guide, told him he would see him, look for him in about 3 weeks. And his idea was he was going to be prospecting the area around Toba Inlet for this lost gold mine. Now, some of Osman's accounts, I don't think it's in the written account, but it's in the newspaper accounts. He said thought he was around 30 miles northeast of Toba Inlet when he was captured, when he was captured by a Sasquatch. So I draw a line here, 30 miles up from northeast from Toba Inlet. And that puts him just east of Lillooet Mountain, roundabouts. This is the first possible Osman campsite where he was abducted. Would have been around 30 miles in. Now, if you'll notice, there's not a lot of greenery around here. There's really not really many trees. We do have some brush and stuff there, but not a lot of heavy forested areas here. Of course, this is a modern photograph too, modern satellite image.
Yeah, and that area was very heavily forested, I believe, too, for a while too.
So, possible campsite number 1. But there's a problem here. Just below or round about this area is Silt Lake. Now, Osman never mentioned seeing a lake. In fact, Osman also mentioned specifically making a wooden spade or a wooden shovel, and digging for water. He would dig down into the water. And this is an old mountain man technique. They would dig down in an area that was maybe damp or had a spring, and they would let the water pool up, and that's how they would get their drinking water. However, I don't think if Osman had been in this area, he would have been right near Silt Lake. He would have seen this. I think he would have mentioned it in his account. Okay, anyway, let's back up a little bit. Now, if we remember, northeast is around a 30-degree range. It could be up here. It could be a little up. So I dropped down a little bit. I dropped down a little bit to the south. And so we leave Toba Inlet here. Now this is a little bit further. This line extends over here. It's around 65 miles. Now, I think it's well possible within 3 or 4 days for a man to do 65 miles in the wilderness. That may be debatable.
The average person walks 3 miles per hour, and that's without brush.
Without packs, yeah.
Without packs, without brush, without, terrain necessarily. Right. So 60 some odd miles in 3 days is going to be a little bit of a stretch, because that's 10 hours walking if you're just walking on a nice normal surface. Yeah. Per day.
And
that's a lot of walking per day.
Right. It's all has to do. He had to do a lot of climbing. Okay. Now, you can always, if you go uphill, you always get to go downhill. Okay. But he would have had to do a lot of climbing. But the second campsite, I picked this one because it's close to Ogden, Verlone, Mount Sloan, and Caldwalder Peak. These sites here have had gold mining. Okay, there's been gold found in these areas. And if one considers that Osman may have gone a bit further than the 30 miles he estimated, he could have well made his long-term camp here. And that's the one that I theorize that he was likely captured at. Somewhere around this area. And, like I said, though, that was almost, it's twice the distance of what he originally described as being 30 miles northeast. There's a lake north of it, but, then you got to add some more mileage. He never describes any lakes. He never describes crossing any rivers other than going to the Toba, going up the Toba Inlet to get to the head of the Toba. So, we're at the second possible long-term campsite. This is where he gets nabbed or kidnapped, supposedly. Now, we don't know what time of night he got nabbed because he was asleep. He fell asleep. But we do know that he woke up, of course, after the creature grabbed him, and for some hours, he was cramped up in his sleeping bag where this thing was carrying him over its shoulder. And he described that he had reached the destination about 4 a.m. So if we figure, 4 to 6 hours of travel time, I got 20 miles, 19.5 or 19.35 miles. And after reviewing some close-up shots of Google Earth, I came up with this one. Now, where he described was a pass or a valley that had almost a sheer rock edge wall, and it had a entrance shaped like a V-shaped entrance at the bottom, southwest corner, which would be here. And the V-shaped entrance would be approximately 8 feet wide at the entrance where he went in. And this here works out pretty good. From here, let's see, that would be about 8 feet across there, or 10 feet. So this is the area where I feel Osman was possibly held captive. It goes into this valley here, around 20 acres of land inside the valley. The rock walls are sheer, and there's only one good way in and out. So
now, let me ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Let me ask a quick question, Chris. It's about how many miles is that from where he first entered the Forest of Toba, allegedly entered the Forest of Toba Inlet?
Okay, from Toba Inlet to here, if we draw a straight line, we're going to have a problem because I think he's going to have to cross rivers.
Right.
He doesn't mention crossing any rivers. So that's why.
But how many miles are we talking? Probably about 70, 80 miles.
Yeah. I'll do a quick check here. Okay, from Toba Inlet over here to the possibly held captive is 72 miles. Yeah, if he went a straight line.
Yeah, that's a bit much. And, when you lose your bearings like that, if you're any kind of person like Osman claimed to have been, you would have followed the rivers.
Right.
Right. That's your true point. That you come to a river point, that if you head south or north or, you're eventually going to come to a certain lake or a geographic location where the river empties out.
And see, that's another reason that I would have because he starts out at the head of Toba Inlet, and then he ends up down south here, being rescued at Salmon Inlet. Okay, and we know the story starts out, or the encounter begins. He says he traveled around 30 miles in one counter northeast. In another version, he figured he was around 75 miles in when he got abducted. So this fits with the 75. This doesn't fit with the 30. But the northeast direction is correct, would be correct. Because if he headed southeast, he would have run into the rivers. All these waterways down here.
Now,
Malibu,
if you look at Mick's comment there, it says, I don't give much worth to the fact that it didn't mention crossing a river because if you lived in Canada at that time, crossing a river is the equivalent to crossing the street today. Maybe, but I really think it probably would have helped with the geographical location. Like, I remember crossing this river here or that river there or this stream or this lake or going around this lake or that. Because he's guiding us. You think about it, he's talking about this location and that location and giving distinct descriptions. Why the absence of the rivers if you're giving that much? It's not so much that he's forgetting it. He's giving us descriptions of water inlets and stuff like that, but the area between point A and point B is not being described very accurately.
Since he did not have a boat or an inflatable. I guess they had inflatables back then, but he did not mention having any of that. I don't feel like he would have crossed any rivers. And that's why the reason why I went with this route on Google Maps, Google Earth, is because, for one, the area south and southeast of Toba, the head of Toba Inlet, we have rivers here that he would have had to cross. We know he's got to be working his way over to the Salmon Inlet. But in this entire area, there are rivers and streams and lakes. He couldn't have went across that without a boat unless he swam it, and he never mentioned.
Now, Mick has a little objection to what I said, but just put yourself in the mindset. And I am. And when you are describing something for somebody and you're being descriptive about this and descriptive about that, and he was, I mean, let's face it, I came into this V-shaped thing and, you know, he's trying to pinpoint it for allegedly John Green when he's recounting this. But if he crossed the river, that would be a pretty important omission not to state.
Right.
You know, well, I know I crossed this river at this point, and so it had to have been X amount of miles here till I got to my camp, but he never mentions it. And that's the issue. He's trying to tell John where the camp is, but he's omitting the major landmark, which is the water.
So there's another point. And the reason why I make this kind of backwards C as a possible path back to where where he left, started, began to where he finished. And that was the claim that after he escaped the Sasquatch camp, his captors, he climbed to the top of a mountain and he was able to view Mount Baker. Now, Mount Baker is in northern Washington state, and Osmond would have had to climb to a very high peak in order to see Mount Baker if he was able to, because the problem here is, and this is one of the issues I had with the story, Mount Baker is almost exactly 100 miles south of that area where he was. Now, the highest mountain in that area where he would have possibly been able to see Mount Baker, if he wasn't mistaken, that's possible too, is Wedge Mountain. Now, Wedge Mountain is, let's see, how many feet tall? 9,498 feet tall.
Yeah, you're talking, you know, you think he would have said something about the elevation, because that's way the hell up there.
Yeah. Mount Baker, I think, is around 10 or 11. Let me look. Let me make sure I don't want to tell anybody wrong. Mount Baker is 10,786 feet. So he would have been looking.
Well, it's not so much how tall Mount Baker is, as much as how tall are the mountains around Wedge Mountain, where you would not be able to see over those mountains.
Right. So that's one of the things of the story that kind of bugs me. All right, I'll be honest with you, that kind of bugs me. But it doesn't bug me to the point where I'm going to discount his story, because I think he may have viewed another mountain, or he may have possibly viewed Mount Baker. Or he may have viewed another peak off to the southeast and been mistaken and misidentified it as Mount Baker.
Right.
It's very, very possible.
So let's talk about, you know, he
100 miles is a long way.
He escaped using snuff.
Right.
That was out of his pack. He had his coffee tin with him, but he didn't have his utensils. That was left behind, which kind of makes. Well, we're going to get into that too.
Yeah, that's another part of the story that is a little bit convenient. Not only did the creature grab him and pick him up in his sleeping bag, but it also grabbed his knapsack or his backpack with all his food and supplies.
Yeah, his pack sack.
with all his food and supplies. So
with the exception of his utensils.
Yeah.
Because he does make a mention now. Why, if you have your coffee tin there, why isn't your utensils in the pack sack as well?
Right. That is a little bit convenient. It is.
Right.
Does that make it, out of the air of possibility? No, it doesn't. He could have been lucky.
The probability is very slim. Let's face that much.
Yes, that's not a good point in the story. That's too lucky. That's too lucky.
And we're gonna get into all this analysis stuff in a little bit. We still got some more stuff, a lot more stuff to disseminate on the show. It's gonna be a very, very exciting show. So are we good with the maps, Chris? We'll move on to our debunking article.
Yeah, hang on, let me unshare this. How do I do that?
Well, here, no, I can do that.
Okay. Okay.
Whoops.
I think I got it there.
All right, yeah, we're good to go. I don't have this on the viewer, but I'm gonna kind of read this a little bit. So there is a group called the Canadian Cryptozoology Club, and just for folks who wanted to know, that was created. The Canada's Cryptozoology Club was founded in 1989 by writer James A. Clark, scientist Dr. Paul LeBlond, and journalist John Kirk. We know John Kirk; he's a friend of mine. Yeah. The British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club, the BCSCC, comprises a broadly based membership of enthusiasts dedicated to the investigation of various animals yet unidentified by science. We are actively engaged year-round in many different aspects of exciting fieldwork. And again, they were created in 1988. Now, I'm not sure what year this article necessarily came out, because I do not believe, let me just double-check and see if it was dated. But
yeah, shoot, I don't have that up, Steve.
It was not dated, but I have the article right here.
Okay.
So, and the article starts off, as many will know, in 1957, Albert Ostman responded to an article in the Province newspaper in which William Rowe told his 1955 sighting of a female Sasquatch on Mica Mountain near Teejun Cache, British Columbia. Rowe was prompted to tell of his sighting because the village of Harrison Hot Springs had garnered huge attention around the world for wanting to put on a Sasquatch on as part of the 1958 centenary celebrations around the 100th anniversary of the founding of British Columbia. Rowe thought he would share this experience, as Sasquatch had become quite the hot topic locally and globally. Ostman read of Rowe's experience and then contacted the province to relate how he had been kidnapped by a Sasquatch near Toba Inlet, BC, and had finally escaped from a Sasquatch family after spending 6 days trapped with them. Ostman was interviewed by both Renee Hinden and John Green, and Green even had Ostman swear an affidavit before a justice of the peace named Naismith, who signed off on a document that stated he could not find anything in Ostman's testimony about the kidnapping that would indicate Ostman was not being truthful. We do not know if Naismith had the requisite professional competencies that would allow him to determine whether Ostman was being truthful or not. At best, Naismith was offering a personal opinion and not a qualified legal assessment of the Ostman tale.
I've got that if you want me to share it, Steve. The A.M. Naismith.
Yeah, if you want to put it up there, that's fine while I read read that. Now, the interesting thing too is that even a trained forensic interviewer has to render, like myself, you have to render an opinion anyway. It's not anything that's scientific by any means; it's a subjective opinion. And Naismith probably did not have the professional competencies that really would be prerequisites to determining truth via body language or neurolinguistics or any of that malarkey. But definitely interesting. So I'm going to skip a few paragraphs.
I'm still trying to share this. Go ahead. I'll do it in the background.
So The BCSCC goes on to say that thanks to the internet, we were able to find a ton of information in regard to Osmond's life that is not present in any of the articles or passages in books written about him or in the recorded film and radio interviews he was featured in. They have a ton of personal info on him, including birthday, place of birth, where he lived, where he died, who his parents were, siblings, all that fun stuff. But they did, and I'm going to say this, and it may not have been their fault because at the time of the writing of this, they may not have had all the information that's available today. That's why investigations are pragmatic. New stuff comes up. Now, the first piece of information, they said Osmond tells of how he felt he needed a vacation after working too hard and had read about there being a lost gold mines around the Toba Inlet where he would go on holiday and prospect. He booked passage to Lund on the Union Steamship line where he would take on a native guide who would convey him by canoe to his destination at the head of the inlet. We searched for any info we could on supposed gold mines in Toba Inlet, and we could find nothing of the sort. Chris, you have found that to the contrary, correct?
Yeah. There have been gold mines there, yeah.
Correct. Right. There were lost Spanish mines in Jervis Inlet to the north, which continue to be searched to this day, but not one of the BC gold mining. So Chris did find some references to Toba Inlet gold lines. One, right. So that's kind of weak. Nope, don't put that one up yet, Chris, please. We're not ready for that yet. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Osmond claims he was told about a Sasquatch by an old Indian in Lund, BC, that he had hired to take him to Toba Inlet. This is Osmond's description of the conversation, and yada, 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 yada. We go into that.
Yeah, I can't put that file up.
He said, at the time, I never heard of Sasquatch, so I asked what kind of animal he calls Sasquatch. Yada, yada. This is patent nonsense. The word Sasquatch was not coined by John Walter Burns of Port Aloy, and later the Chalice Reservation in British Columbia until 1929, some 5 years after Osmond's fellow told with the creature. Well, now we can pull that article up. That is incorrect.
Yeah.
Because if we actually read the actual article,
by J.W. Burns.
And you're looking at the cover page of the actual article dated April 1st, 1929, which is being referenced in this. It says he doesn't coin the term Sasquatch.
Right.
There's a fallacy right there.
Yes.
We always thought that. I've used that myself. But
Yes.
J.W. Burns coined the term Sasquatch. Here is where it is, right here. It's a quote. He was talking to an Indian named Charlie. And Charlie said, he says, I met, blah, 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 but let Charlie tell the story himself. And this is Charlie's quote. The strange people, of whom there are but few now, rarely seen and seldom met, are known by the name Sasquatch or the Hairy Mountain Men.
Yeah.
So J.W. Burns did not make that term up. He was being told that term that appeared in a 1929 article.
Right.
And his source knew of the name Sasquatch.
Yes.
So in 1924, that term could have very well existed. It just wasn't known to J.W. Burns at that time, as it wasn't known to Albert Osmond 24. So that point is not valid either.
Right. The term Sasquatch was commonly used and commonly known by the native tribes in the area.
Right.
Already in 1929.
Are known by the name of Sasquatch or the Hairy Mountain Men.
Yes. So all that time, all that information, I know everybody's probably read it. You've probably seen it. You've probably heard it. That the first time the term Sasquatch was coined by J.W. Burns in 1929. That's not true.
It was not coined. It was conveyed in a public manner.
Right. That was the first. But it was
known to the native, the First Nations people of British Columbia prior to that. And when they started to know that, who knows? And we even know that it is a derivative of the word Sasquatch, which is very close to Sasquatch.
Yeah. So in 1924, it's very possible and very likely that that the local people there were using the term Sasquatch for the hairy people.
And what I am seeing here is
that's one thing that blew me away.
Right. And there it is. And we have that right there in print in front of you, as the story goes on.
If you guys want to look it up on the podcast, it's McLean, M-A-C-L-E-A-N.
That's right there in front of you, McLean's, M-A-C-L-E-A-N-S. Trivia.
And the article date, it's April 1st, 1929, which is not a good date for a story.
Right. How do we know this even existed? It was even true.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know this is nothing but bunk? How do we know this is just not a whole April Fool's tale? Nobody ever even thought of that one, did they?
That's not a good date for a story. But
right. Because traditionally, let's think about this. Traditionally, that's been the date for bad Bigfoot stories in the press for years.
In the U.S.
Canada. And Canada. Well, don't forget Jacko.
The thing is, this is a bi-monthly magazine. You got 2 issues.
No, it's a monthly. There's actually a May edition as well.
You get up right there at the top. It says twice a month. So you
twice
get
a month. I'm sorry, twice.
One on the first, one on the 15th.
So that's not is that bi-monthly? No, that bi-monthly is every other month. I don't know. Well, whatever it is.
Yeah, twice a month. Twice a month.
Twice a month.
Yeah. So that you get two magazines per month. So it'd be 24 a year, right? And
subscription was probably a nickel back then.
Yeah, the cover price is 10 cents. It's 10 cents right there on the cover, and you could probably get a subscription for, No,
actually, Don, it was Sasquatch.
Yeah,
it's S-A-S-Q-U-A-C, Sasquatch.
It's really close. Yeah,
right.
It's really close.
He just added a T and an H.
But see, this blew me away. For years, I'd always heard this. J.W. Burns coined the term Sasquatch in 1929. J.W. Burns, and no, he did not coin the term. He was probably the first to report the term for the written print in the press. So he does, still garner that honor. But as far as coining the name, like the name Bigfoot in California some years later, no, he didn't coin the name. This name already existed by the indigenous people.
Right.
He just was the first to report them using it and describing it with the hairy people. So that was good.
Right. And then you know what? Sasquatch and Sasquatch become interchangeable because at that point in time, you can say, well, yeah, I heard of a Sasquatch because that's what they're calling it. I must have misheard that old Indian back in the day, and Sasquatch was actually Sasquatch.
Yeah.
So that's very plausible. So that point is kind of moot, unfortunately, and it does not really work. Now, this is where we have Osmond stated in his account that he climbed to 1,000 feet in Toba Inlet and was able to see the Straits of Georgia, now the Salish Sea. And, of course, the geography stuff is spot on.
Yes. It was very good. If he climbed 1,000 feet, he was not going to be able to see to the end of the Toba Inlet. No. From the head of the Toba Inlet to the end of the Toba Inlet, no. He could not see out there in open water. No way.
Now, Osmond, according to the article, Osmond contradicted himself in March 1958 when he and John Green attended a festival of the annual Agassiz Board of Trade banquet, where he states that, Osmond states there that he was about 30 miles north of Toba Inlet when he was abducted. That's in stark contrast to the 75 miles he had said several earlier retellings. Now, again, as an investigator and as people can get sketch-a-datch with their distances, heights, weights, times, anything that's a measure basically can be very skewed in a person's mind. I myself have always had a range of maybe it was 100, and then you start thinking about maybe it was 115, maybe it was, unless you're out there with an actual tape measure or a pedometer or any of that, that can sway. That is kind of a big swing, though, 30 to 75. 30 to 50, maybe 30 to 40, 20 to 30 to 20. I can understand 30 to 75. And then again,
that's why I included 2 possible campsites.
They may have been having a kind of an off night. And then, of course, carrying a 90-pound backpack. Well, that is a bit of a stretch because that's a lot of weight.
Yeah. That's a lot of weight.
Like I said, how far could he have traveled? Now, was it 90 pounds? Did he actually weigh it? Again.
Estimated.
Right.
When I'm carrying groceries in, a lot of times I'm like, oh my God, this bag must weigh 50 pounds. And then, it only weighs about 5.
He could have been carrying 40 pounds, and after about 10 miles, it felt like
probably feel like it 80.
Or 90 pounds, yeah. So that's, again, kind of, and that is a bit, again, these are check marks that they're not ifs, but they are kind of strange.
Not really a red flag, but a pink flag, maybe. Something that should take a second look at.
All right. Sorry about that. I had to yell at my Alexa. For some reason, I got this weird function going on. It's turning my lights off at weird times.
Your office assistant needs something.
Well, the thing is I have no routines that are shutting the lights off. They just naturally, for some reason, this light shuts off about this time of night. And then my living room light will shut off like at 11:30, and I'm still sitting there watching TV.
Yeah. Oh, Mike said, if it's in bear country, why was his food not in a tree or outside of camp? He did hang his pack up, Mike. He hung his pack up because he had noticed his pack was still hanging, but it had been turned upside down.
So we got a lot more to come because we know a lot about Albert Ostman.
yeah, we do. Yeah. But when I first came across that article that was debunking the Albert Ostman claim, I was just gutted. I was like, oh my goodness. And now, as we started looking into it a little bit more, of course, we're covering some of that now.
When Ostman finally arrived at the Seashell Inlet after allegedly fleeing from the Sasquatch family, he claims he was found by loggers who came to his aid. Ostman was Swedish, and yet his story, if it were true, falls to relate that he should have run into Swedish loggers in that area. But again, this is making assumptions.
Yeah.
Where they are notes, these are not certainties.
Right.
Now, you cannot argue with some of the geographical stuff. But some of these, now you're just looking for reasons to pile on. And that's something we don't want to do. This is kind of a sketchy thing. Yeah, it's strange and it's worth a note, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. It's like, why didn't Ostman not mention that he had met fellow Swedes? Well, how do you know he did? You weren't there. You can't. Maybe he met the one German family there, or maybe he met a Canadian family. We don't know.
Would it really? He was from Sweden himself, and would it really been odd for him to meet other people from Sweden? Probably not.
Right. And maybe that wasn't worth mentioning. Maybe that wasn't worth mentioning either.
Right.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Mick.
Mick, oh my goodness.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Mick.
5 memberships. Thank you.
What a guy.
Remember, for the folks who are getting the memberships, if you like the membership, please stick around. It's cheap. Only 99 cents a month for crying out loud at the lowest. So have a good time. And you're supporting honest and healthy research like this.
Yeah, you used to be able to get a cup of coffee for 99 cents. You can't even buy a cup of coffee for that.
Now we come into this. In our search for evidence to support or disprove Ostman's story, we came across a U.S. immigration document indicating that Ostman entered the United States on May 27, 1924 in Blaine, Washington, just weeks before he was supposed to go to Toba Inlet, and stated to American immigration officers that he intended to establish permanent United States residency at a farm in Auburn, Washington, where he planned to work as a laborer. And that is very true.
That was it. That was the red flag that got me.
Right.
That was the red flag.
But
yeah.
the Squatch Detective This is not the record they found. I believe they found a log entry of him and stuff.
Entry.
Right. If we actually look at the actual record here, I'm sorry, I just had a little brain nugget here. But what we see here, hey John, I appreciate that, but it does it every night at the same time, whether the light's been on or off all day. So usually it's not on. I just turned it on when I came in here an hour ago. So it's not overheating. It's a routine that's allegedly in my Alexa app, but it's not in my Alexa app.
It's the AI taking over Steve's smart light bulbs.
So anyway,
so 1923 or 1924 was not the first time he arrived in America.
Correct.
He arrived.
It says there's a line in there and it says ever in U.S. And he said yes, from September 1913 to June 1923. So he left
in 1923
for sometime in June of 1923. And he came back in May of, so he was gone for 11 months, almost 12 months. He was gone for a year. Went back to the homeland. Back to
Sweden. Mm-hmm.
Back to Sweden. And we know this because, and we'll get into that in a second, but he did come over in this liner, the Empress of Asia. So he came in through Asia as opposed to doing an east-west. But he's coming to the west coast of the United States. And hello, thank you, Patty.
Patty.
Welcome.
So he had been in the United States for 10 years. 10 years. And then he leaves the United States to go back to make a trip to Sweden. He's gone for 11 months, and he comes back via the Empress of Asia.
Correct. And there is the Empress of Asia. That's actually a postcard of the Empress of Asia. And as I was telling Chris, I got on that boat and had a gas attack. No, not really. The Empress of Asia actually served in World War I as a troop transport, survived World War I, however, did not survive World War II. And got torpedoed by a Japanese sub where it eventually sunk there. And believe it or not, the wreckage was found in 2010.
Oh, wow.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that's a little side note in history there we like to do every once in a while.
So this was not a direct route trip.
No.
This was.
And as Chris and I discussed earlier, that is it possible that maybe he worked his transport off? But anyway, we have June and eventually July. So maybe he worked his, butt off in June, and he may have worked to get his passage from the Orient over to here, because that's a long trip. I mean, you think about it, he went on a cross-country trip. Did he work? Did he not? We don't know what he did. But this is something they were unaware of, that he had been in the United States for 10 years, and then he goes on this 11-month journey. And of course, if you think about it, when he entered the United States, he was 20 or 21 years old. When he leaves and comes back, he's now 31.
Right.
But he was in the United States for 10 years, or until he was 30, and then took a trip, came back when he was 31.
Right.
So again, this is all wrong. So he actually was in here. And for those who are wondering, we do have the record of him coming in 1913, and that's his 1913 record. That's his actual 1913 record there.
There it is. Ostman Albert. See the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down. Albert Ostman. Now that's the original from 1913, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so he'd been in the United States 10 years, left for a year, 11 months. Let's just call it a year. It's close enough. To go to Sweden. Comes back through, where was it, Steve? Singapore or
Hong Kong?
Hong Kong. On the boat. Now, is it possible he worked his passage? I think it's likely he worked his passage.
Right.
Ostman was not a man of means by any
correct
any sense of the word. All right. So how would he be able to do world traveling? Well, I'd say there's a 99% chance. This is just opinion, but I'd say there's a 99% chance in order to gain passage to Sweden and back, he worked his way through it. And that was a common means back in those days. You didn't have the money, you had labor. You could work.
Yep. And that ship did hold about 600 passengers as well. So what does this all mean? And, obviously, here's this article, and as I started looking at it, I told Chris, I go, well, this is good for its time. A lot of this is very subjective. Like, why didn't he mention the Swedes? Well, how do we know he met Swedes? Well, it was a certainty. Well, how do you know it was a certainty?
Even if he did meet Swedish loggers,
maybe
he was Swedish, so, it's kind of odd.
Right.
I wouldn't have probably thought anything about it if I had been him either.
Right. So while the article does bring up the point, but it was almost like an I gotcha moment. Like, oh, well, he only came into the United States in 1923 or 19, how can he be so tired of all this? He came in May of 1924. How can he be all tired from all this work and going on a vacation when he may have visited home, worked his way back to get back to the United States?
Yeah.
But let's face it, he was gone for 11 months.
Yeah.
He had to have been earning some income somewhere along that point in time.
Yeah. And the ocean voyages at that time were very lengthy.
Yes.
You weren't on a ship for 3 weeks and going from continent to continent. No, this was like months and months at sea.
Right.
Anybody that's going to be at sea that long is going to be sick and tired of looking at water.
Right. So, now, the story of Munchalot Harry, they all came out about the same time. Like I said, we've kind of torn apart that whole talking about Sasquatch. It couldn't have been because J.B. Burns didn't coin the term until 1929. Well, it wasn't coined by him. It was relayed to him by a Native American, and he first published it in 1929. Right. Lord knows how long they have been calling it that. Right.
That's a big boom for me. I'm like, wow.
Right.
Because, you get this in your mind, these things in your mind. Well, why is that so? Because I've been told that. But what I've been told is wrong.
So lesson, and that's a good question too, David. We'll get to that. And we're starting all the questions till the end. We're going to do that the last half hour of the show. So we got a few more minutes of presentation here, and we'll get to the questions.
Yeah.
Now, what's my take on it? Now, again, like I said, that investigation is pragmatic. Knowledge is eternal, and it's always ongoing. And over the years, I've learned to reevaluate things. And when I first got into this mystery, this sounded like a real titillating tale and a very exciting tale of a kidnapping. And I remember this tale as a kid. As it was relayed in The Abominable Snowman, written by Eric Bauman, which was a pseudonym for John Keel, for those who don't know.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't know that, too, until I started. Whatever became of this guy, and then it turned out Eric Bauman was a pseudonym for John Keel. Oh, okay, now we understand. Because he was writing so many books.
Well, tonight has been educational so far.
So that story always scared me as a little boy. So, Bigfoot, right?
Right.
But as we learn and we get older and we get wiser and we get, and I talked to Chris about this too, and I think Chris kind of sees this too. When you deal with people who tell stories, there is a big difference between real stories and a big difference between phony stories. And that's because of the psychology of people. Here we go again, back to psychology. And if you haven't gotten psychology of Bigfoot, again, shameless plug, time to work that in. It's on for sale at Amazon. The link's down below. Everybody acts a certain way. Now, we look at this case of Albert Ostman, and there are some incredulous claims to this. Let's put aside the geographical stuff. Let's put aside the objective minutia. Let's take a look at some of the subjective minutia. Again, agreed 100%, Don. I think it's very sus that the Bigfoot would take his pack too. Very convenient, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have one, convenience. He escapes by using the tin of snuff to kind of fake out the old man and then fire his weapon to escape. And he does that after 6 days of capture. Right? I find that sus as well. Let's just say he pulled his gun up and fired it and then escaped. I find that sus as well. Why? The initial, what made him get to that point? There was no point at that.
Well, I think him keeping his gun in his sleeping bag with him on the either third or the fourth night. This has been going on for like 3 nights. He had been having
Chris,
a night.
Nick, I think you're kind of picking it apart. How do you pronounce Sasquatch there? It was pronounced Sasquatch, and I don't believe there was so Sasquatch is Sasquatch, and it's not very far from Sasquatch. So it's not coined by J.W. Burns. That means he made it up. My guess is he misheard it, or he didn't know how to spell it correctly. So he called it Sasquatch because Sasquatch and Sasquatch are very much the same. And it's not Sasquatch, it's Sasquatch. I've read directly from John Green that it was Sasquatch, not Sasquatch.
But
anyway,
Ostman had been receiving visitors for 3 nights in a row, and so he knew it was not an animal. He couldn't figure out what. He didn't know what it was. Well, that was one of the things. That was one of the things. And since if J.W. Burns heard Charlie say Sasquatch, it's very easy to believe and very practical and plausible that Albert Ostman would have heard his Indian guide say Sasquatch. It would have been very, very easy.
Or something very similar.
Very similar, yes.
And then 20 years later, he sees it written as Sasquatch, and he just continues to roll with it. Okay, that's what it must have been.
Right.
Yeah. Because let's face it, I get told the term once, look out for the Adenauer. Chris, can you spell that for me?
The what?
Adenauer.
And no, I can't spell that. I'm not even going to try.
That's the stone giant the Iroquois believe in. So I'm sorry, but it's just so annoying. I try hard to keep things straight and keep things on the straight and narrow. And again, I'm looking at the chat. I said I was no longer going to look at the chat.
Well, I've been going through the starring questions because while I was looking at
But anyway, where was I? Where people get me derailed. So what I'm looking at is a pattern here. And what I see is, if you think about it,
I said I'm back. My internet cut out again.
Ouch.
I don't know what's going on. The squirrels are
every tall tale has some convenient things going on, right? There may be sprinkled with some truth, and that makes it even tougher to decipher because obviously Ostman knew a bunch about Toba Inlet and that surrounding area, a little bit, not completely, but a little bit. He's going to gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
Never talks about his pans, which is really bizarre. Conveniently forgets his eating utensils. That's a whole nother story while he's in captivity. But what I find is that if we look at the Bigfoot peeper case, think about convenience. Well, I was sitting there and I smelled this smell. Well, I'm in my camp and I'm beginning these strange night visits. I see this creature in the window and I just happen to have a video recorder next to me. Well, this thing, I happen to be keeping my rifle in my sleeping bag, and it happened to take my backpack too, or my pack sack. Number one, and I explained this to Chris, if tactically, it makes no sense to keep your rifle in a sleeping bag. If you want to hide it, you can put it under your sleeping bag, because bottom line is this, you need to pull it fast. What are you going to do? Pull it out that way? No, you're going to pull it out from underneath, and then you're going to have it. Right? And plus, what about keeping a loaded gun with you while you're sleeping, and you may roll on it and accidentally hit the trigger and fire it, or knock the safety off or whatever. Makes no sense to be sleeping with a rifle in your sleeping bag, because it does you no good there tactically.
Well, the thing is,
but what we're seeing, Chris, is these incredibly coincidental and convenient items being attached to this. Because why? Why is the gun in the sleeping bag important? Because it's his way of escape down the road on the tail, firing a shot over his head, right?
Right.
So he's with them for 6 days. 6 days.
Right.
Bigfoot peeper case. I was videotaping it for 8 minutes. Then my wife walks in and screams and goes to call the sheriff's department. So I got my gun. Well, what happened with the other 8 minutes? If you were going to get your gun and you were worried about safety, you would have done that immediately. Well, again, with Osman, why are you going to wait 6 days? Why not just do it when you get out? Okay, everything's there. Boom, I'm out in a day and a half. Tops.
Well, we got some issues there, Steve. Now, Ostman admitted he carried a 30-30 rifle. Now, at that point in time, the most common 30-30 would have been a lever action.
Hmm?
They hold 3 rounds. He doesn't tell what brand. But
again, another problem, another similarity with the Bigfoot peeper case, because he says, "Oh, I got my 380." Well, what was the brand? Was it an automatic? Was it a revolver? What was it? Right? Vagueness. It's vague. It's very detailed in certain aspects, but it's very vague in other particular aspects which could be verified. Because if he said, "Oh yeah, I pulled out my Remington 30-30 lever action," John Green could have easily said, "Well, you still have it? Where'd you sell it? Can I look at it?" If he made the story up and doesn't have it, like in the Bigfoot peeper case, he said he pulled out a 380. He was vague because he never owned a 380. He was a convicted felon. It was illegal for him to own a handgun.
Right.
So my point being is that you're so vague on that fact, on what type of firearm it is, right?
Yes.
Because we're making a lot of assumptions that it's a lever action because he said nothing of the sort.
Well,
he just said I had my 30-30, right?
Yeah, I do the same thing. A lever action 30-30 since about 1870. The most popular lever action 30-30 rifle has been a Winchester.
Right.
Winchester.
I'm not disputing that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is he's put in so much detail about stopping and talking to the Indian and getting supplies and what kind of utensils he has and what kind of food he has and what kind of equipment he's carrying.
Everything.
Right. But on one of these most critical pieces of information, the rifle, which is the big item of convenience, he's very vague about.
Well, he did not mention a specific name brand, but commonly 30-30 rifle, the lever actions would have been the most common. and they would have all of them had held 3 rounds. So there's a problem right there. He has 4 Sasquatch. He has 3 rounds.
Well, if he has 3,
could have had 4.
Well, there is a problem there, because if he has 3 rounds, he wasted 1 in the air to get out.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It makes no sense. None of it makes sense to me. Why, if you're that worried about getting out of there and you only have 3 shots, why are you going to shoot 1 in the air?
Well, yeah, he didn't want to kill him.
Okay, I get that. So how is having 3 shots or 8 shots or whatever, how is that even a possibility? Because he's putting 1 in the air, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, on his last day, he decided he was getting out even if he had to shoot his way out. So before the 6 days, but the first 5 days, he's fine. He's still got food and everything. He's trying to get away. The 6th day, he's out of food, and he decides he's getting out of there if he has to shoot his way out or not. Now, the reason why he didn't shoot his way out, one of the reasons he mentions, he was afraid the big guy, the old man, was so large, he wasn't for sure his 30-30 would take it down. That rings true.
I don't know. Because he's in Grizz country.
Yeah.
He's in Grizz country.
Sure.
And what rifle commonly takes down a grizzly bear? A 30-30. So that to me rings of horse manure.
Well, there are a couple of more points in there. He shoots a grouse with his 30-30 rifle. A grouse.
That's a little bit of a big gun for a grouse. And Chris froze. Chris's internet is not working too good tonight. Are you back, Chris? Uh-oh. Well, anyway, Chris is having some technical difficulties.
I'm back.
He's back. There you are.
I'm back. And, hang on. The Model 94. I'm going to look this up, make sure. Hang on. Because we got a comment from Pat, I think it was. No, it was Pine Island Research. So it holds 5 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. Let me look it up here. I think that would have been a model 1894, more likely.
I don't think people would keep it, Pat, in their bag. You would keep it under your bag or near your bag. Because up there, you're going to grab it quick. You need to grab that quick. If it's in your bag, think about that. Now you got a bear. Now what do you got to do? You got to find your gun. You got to pull it out of the bag. And then you got to position it and aim it. Whereas if you had it laying.
Yeah. 5 rounds.
Yeah. Boom. So.
5 rounds. That's right. Pat, you're right. 5 rounds. Or no, it wasn't Pat. It was Pine Island Research. Who's it? Is that Jeff? Pine Island? Yeah, 5 in the tube, 1 in chamber. That would have been 6 rounds. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was when I said 30-30. I was thinking of 30-06. I apologize.
Well, anyway. His thoughts were he wasn't going to have enough rounds to shoot his way out if he had to use several on one of the creatures, and he had 4.
But you see again, when somebody is using a made up story,
yeah,
that logic doesn't work, because he's going to shoot his way out, and he does, but he puts 1 in the air. So now he's got 3. Wouldn't it make more sense to plug
or
1?
4, yeah.
Right. Or he's got, 3 or 4 shots or whatever shots. Right. He's wasting a shot in the air. Makes no sense. Right. So that's what I'm saying is that any argument he has, well, I got too many Sasquatch and I don't have enough. I'm afraid it's going to take a few. Well, you decide to do it and you put 1 in the air and go. Why do you wait 6 days? Why do you wait till your food runs out? Again, that's something you wouldn't do, because you know what? A normal guy with all this time to think, mind you, 6 days in captivity gives you a lot of time to think.
Yes. Agreed. Now, what are the problems with this story? What are the problems? Number 1 problem.
Oh, the demo of pulling out the gun.
Well, the geographical problem, number one, he couldn't climb 1,000 feet up at the head of Toba Inlet and see out there in the bay. No way. That's 35 miles. No, I don't believe that. I think that's an exaggeration or just a made up fabrication, because I don't believe it possible. Now, the second problem with geography, he describes during his escape from the creatures, he climbed a peak and he was able to view Mount Baker. Now, Mount Baker is 100 miles away. And the mountain he saw, Mount Baker, was only about 1,000 feet higher than the tallest mountain in that area. And let's see, that's why I picked that one. And that kind of coincides with his possible route.
Yep.
If he would have went to the peak of Wedge Mountain, he would have been at, let's see, what was it, 9,498 feet. So that's pretty high up there. Plus, he wouldn't have had to cross any rivers to get there. So those are important details that work out if you're doing the route on Google Earth, trying to determine his route. So 100 miles away, viewing Mount Baker. Now, there's a problem with that. But
because here's the thing. Yeah. He's out of food. Even if he took his rifle and all his pack, his 90-pound sack, or say it's even 40 pounds, walking 3 miles an hour on flat, no terrain surface, right? It's going to take you 10 hours a day. Let's say you're going to work 20. You're going to walk 20 hours a day and sleep for 4. You can get it done in about 2.5 days. But that's a lot of walking, and that's not counting your terrain and not counting all that. And then you have no food because you've waited till the last minute. Why would you wait till the last day? Like, I'm out of food. I got to go.
True.
Right? You wouldn't do that. You'd be like, hey, listen, I got to get out of here. Boom. I'm not going to wait till I run out of food. So none of that. It's just a story of convenience. The story itself does not hold up to logic.
Well, I disagree. Now, I'm still going over the problems now. The distances between the two possible campsites where he was captured. The one of them being 30 miles. The other one being, he said, around 75 miles, which I had factored in around 60 miles. Okay. The second campsite I pointed out on Google Maps is the most likely, according to the 70 mile, 65 mile. That's
right. But I still think physically it sounds impossible, between seeing Mount Baker and between not mentioning lakes or rivers, because he's being so descriptive of other things.
Right.
Having all the stuff taken with him, with the exception of his eating utensils, which I found kind of weird. Wow. Right. To me, when he says, I didn't have my eating utensils. Well, wait a minute. That, to me, sounds like he's making the story up as he goes along, because now he realized, I have a flaw here. I got to make an excuse about my eating utensils because people will ask me, why didn't I just use my eating utensils? Right? Yes. So to me, it has all the hallmarks. It has the same pattern as the Bigfoot peeper. Like, if you're going to escape.
I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, I do. I do, because you think about it. The Sasquatch happens to take all your shit with you.
Yeah,
including your rifle, including your knife, because he's got a knife too, he claims.
Yes.
His Bowie knife or his buck knife, right?
Right.
So he's got his knife.
Well, see, here's the thing. That night when he was captured, supposedly, he was planning to await for his night visitor. So he was fully clothed. He had his boots. His boots weren't on, but they were in his pack. He had his rifle, not in his pack, but in his sleeping bag. He had his rifle in his sleeping bag with him, out of view. So anything that was going to approach his camp at night and come into his camp.
Okay, hold on a second. Mick, I'm not. I'm not assuming anything, and this is fact. Why didn't the guy escape on day 1 or 2? How is it very convenient that Bigfoot scooped up all his stuff and walked off with it.
Well, that's a problem. It's not. Right. It's not impossible. It has
all the hallmarks of the Bigfoot Peeper case, which was, one, very convenient to have a video camera sitting right next to you, fully charged, ready to go. Right? And again, it's very convenient that you're not grabbing your gun until you're after 8 minutes of videotaping this thing going, oh, look at this. And your wife comes in and screams, now you're going to get your gun. Same thing with this. Conveniently, all the equipment is taken, and then he's going to wait 6 days so he can have one hell of a story to talk about all this Bigfoot interaction and how they eat and how they move and how they do things. Keep your audience captive.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I'm running out of food. Now I got to escape. Well, you should have thought of that 4 days ago, because what the hell you're going to eat when it's going to take you 2 to 3 days of getting out of there. And the one thing we don't talk about too is, you can survive a few days without food, but you can't survive a few days without water. And he never addresses that either. And that is the huge one.
Well,
that is the huge one. Because we can all survive without food, but we can't survive without water. And there's no mention of water, only food.
I believe he did mention a spring there, didn't he? Let me go look.
That's convenient too.
Hang on. Because, these creatures do hang around freshwater springs, because I think, this is just opinion, but I think they like to drink from freshwater springs. It would make sense if they had a camp or a temporary home site there. They would have a spring.
Yeah, true. The Bigfoot probably took his canteen too.
No,
I'm not, Nick. A bullshit story is a bullshit story. It doesn't matter if you're telling it in 1955 or 2005. They all have the same earmarks: convenience, non-believability. Come on, I can understand Bigfoot grabbing a person. All right. Well, it sounds far-fetched than keeping the rifle in the sleeping bag. Okay, we'll give him that. But it took its backpack, too.
I admit that's one of the problems I have with it. It's got some convenience in there.
When Osman specifically said one day his backpack had been emptied out on the ground when he had left and come back. So why didn't he empty his backpack out that night? Decided to take it with it and give it back to him. So it's almost like he puts him down, gives him his backpack, and goes about his day. That's weird to me that it's going to throw him down and it's going to empty the backpack. And it's going to rummage through the stuff. It's not going to sit there and give him the backpack for crying out loud. It's already dumped it once. None of this makes sense to me.
Well, he had to get water somewhere to make his coffee. And I'm looking through the account now. Let's see. Can't find it, but there had to be water there somewhere, because where would he get the water for his coffee? Right? You can't make coffee without water.
Well, you'd have to read the BCSCC's account. They did some pretty good stuff when it came to looking at Mount Baker and stuff like that. That was pretty rock solid stuff.
Yes.
The physical stuff they got was okay. We just happened to find more of the immigration stuff, which proved that Osman was away for a year, but, he had been in the United States for 10 years previous. He's been in the United States since he was 20. So it's not like Osman was brand new to the country in 1924. He was actually been in the country for 11 years, 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And then out for a year and then back.
But, it does there are some problems that are problems of convenience. And that sounds too good to be true. That's a problem. So,
essentially, we agree with the BCSCC that this is, at least I do, that this is probably likely a hoax, but for different reasons.
I don't.
Mine is completely from a behavioral thing. It's definitely, it's whack. And we got to be careful what we believe, because the other concern I have is, why did it take him 20 some odd years to come out? Now, the one thing that the article does say is that he did say that he had been kidnapped by a Sasquatch in the 40s. And to me, that kind of argues against the BCSCC's estimation that it's a hoax, because they act like that is something bad. In actuality, it proves that he was telling the story before much of Harry's story became public, before any of the Roe encounter became the William Roe encounter became public. So he was telling this story before anybody else became public. But
yes, there was a spring there in that area. There was a spring for water. Yeah. After he mentions it, after the creature drank, I got sick on the snuff and drank his coffee grounds. Said it began to squeal like a stuck pig. I grabbed my rifle. I said to myself, "This is it. If he comes for me, I will shoot him plumb between his eyes." But he started for the spring. He wanted water. So there was a spring there. Now is that convenient? Yes, it's convenient. But is
Tom, I don't understand that statement. You seem to be like the review board on Scully. I don't get that.
I think it's plausible that there was a spring there. I think it's plausible. It's also convenient.
I am looking at this from a forensic interviewing perspective when I'm talking about this. This is my area of expertise. And unfortunately, John Green, neither Renee DeHinden were forensic experts. So I would love to really, if I had Osman in front of me, I would be probing different questions. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. It's long. I mean, X-Files was 30 years ago, and I wasn't a big fan of a lot of episodes. So
let's look at some of the questions here. We're getting down here the last 15 minutes of the show. We need to start on something. Let's see. Donald Fuller, question for later. Steve, has anyone tried to look for this location of his story?
Unknown.
Not on the ground. I don't know, but I've tried to look for it on Google Earth, and I think I've got a pretty good grasp of it. But is it the correct location? Don't know. That's just my best guess.
Right.
Next question, David Parker. Did he find any gold, or was the story to keep people away from a gold find?
Never mentions finding any gold.
Never mentioned finding any gold.
Right. Either before or after.
Oh, crap.
Never recalls him going back there. What's the matter?
I hit the wrong button, Steve.
Oh, I got it.
Can you take that off the screen? Okay.
What knowledge did he have of that more people dead? I don't understand. I mean, you got to be more specific, because in some of it, and the group from British Columbia may have been there. I think now I'm thinking about it, if I look at their website, they may have actually traveled to that area. See, it says right here, Osman stated in his account that early in the journey, he had climbed to 1,000 feet in Toba Inlet and was able to see the Straits of Georgia, now in South Sea. From this location, observed boats plying in the woes. This is nonsense, because at the head of the Toba Inlet is 35 kilometers from the mouth of the inlet, bends southward into desolation. So what Osman claimed was a view of the strait could not possibly be that. Osman's story also contains a gross factual error that indicates that he does not know the area at all. He says in his article, he does not know the area at all, much like someone who has never been there.
I don't know. I don't think that's accurate. I think he does know the area a little bit.
But in the article, he says he doesn't know the area.
There's some problems.
Right.
There's some problems.
There's some contradictions there.
Okay.
See here, while escaping the Sasquatch kidnapping, Osman said he saw Mount Washington.
Mount Baker
in Washington State from area near Toba Inlet. That is impossible, because the coast range of mountains would have been obstructed his view. So the coastal range of mountains would have obstructed his view. He was on the west side of those mountains, and Mount Baker is over 100 kilometers to the east. Now, remember, 1 kilometer is 3.3 miles.
But they're going, as he said, he saw it from Toba Inlet. No. He was 30 to 75 miles.
So he says he also appears to have completed his escape from the Sasquatch family by moving from somewhere near Toba Inlet to the Salmon Arm Inlet in a single day. This distance is about 60 miles as the crow flies, but mountains and inlets form formidable barriers to progress. It would have taken him at least 3 to 4 days to reach Salmon Inlet from Toba Inlet.
Yeah, Steve, I'm having some internet issues. Hang on just a second.
We're almost there. Right. So yeah, I think there's some issues there. What if he got dropped off in the wrong spot? I don't know. Like I said, he seems to name things in certain areas, but in other areas, he's very much askew.
Okay. Close the door.
And I agree, and that is entirely possible. And I understand Mick's argument over that is that back in that, how, a lot of the stuff doesn't sound like he had a bunch of maps. It sounded like he was going all by sight and what he was told. So yeah, maybe he was wrong about his location. It's entirely possible. But the story itself.
Well, viewing Mount Baker is from 100 miles away is a little stretch. But I think he possibly could have been mistaken. This could have been an honest mistake. He could have saw another tall mountain in the range and thought that was Mount Baker.
Right.
That's possible. Plausible.
Like I said, there are items that why is that doing that?
I'm not touching it.
No, I'm trying to figure out why is that. I'm trying to and Mick, you say that BC topography was second nature to Osman. By his own words in his account, he was not familiar with the area. So I don't know. I think, at best case scenario, it's the kind of guy who went back to the maps and is trying to figure out, like we are, where he was. And because of that, he made some critical errors in retelling his story. But like I say, too much convenience. We need to rein in reality. And he didn't bring back a single souvenir from the Sasquatches either. I mean, did he bring back any hair? Did he bring back any poop? He never talks about pooping.
No.
He never talks about them going to the bathroom. He never talks about himself going to the bathroom. So did he not poop for 6 days?
Well, you got to remember too, Steve, at that time, in culture, that would have been a very taboo thing to discuss, going to the bathroom. That's taboo. Yeah.
Perhaps, but he could have said there was other ways around it back in those days to talk about.
Sure.
But there's a lot of things that are not mentioned that John Green could have asked about that could have come out years later when it wasn't taboo.
Yeah.
Things like, physical traits that you may not see. He doesn't talk about breasts on the female. He just says it's a female.
Yeah.
And he says the other one about a male, but he doesn't. So, I mean, even in the 70s with the book The Creature, there was very blatant descriptions of different things anatomically and sexually that was going on with the creature. So.
And Mike,
well, Nick, I don't know. It says Osman's tale contained information that wasn't well known about Sasquatch. How so? Like what information? Because any of that information, any of that information can be gleaned off of the Jacko story, which was in the 1880s. The twisting of the branches. That was in the Jacko story.
Yes, but
right.
The old lady's duck walk.
Duck walk.
Duck walk.
I've never heard of duck walk.
Well, he described her a goose walk. She walked like a goose. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It's pretty weird. How does a goose walk?
Well, they have like they walk, but they kind of wobble. You know, they're smooth, but they left and right. You know, it's not a
not for nothing, but I've seen plenty of women walk like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
the women that walk straight, and then you have the ones that.
If he's talking about a gait that includes a bent knee while they walk,
but he doesn't say that.
Where did we learn this?
Right.
No, but he's talking like a goose walk. Okay, with a bent knee, sticking the legs way far out. You know, that's descriptive.
Sticking its leg way out? Well, that's not what Patty did. Patty never locked her legs.
No. I'm talking about a bent knee gait, but a long step.
But he never says a bent knee gait.
No, he says a goose walk. Right.
Well, how does a goose walk? Geese don't have knees, so we can't make that assumption, right?
Yeah, they've got a backwards.
I mean, a goose walk. She might have just been waddling, and that's why she might have just been waddling. Maybe nothing to do with the knees, right?
Very possible.
So it's a vague term, and we can't put anything to that.
It is,
right?
It is,
and as investigators, that's what we need not to do, is to make assumptions, and that would be an assumption. What I'm saying is that they made some assumptions on the BCSCC, and we've corrected those, right?
Right.
It's not a very strong case for or against, except the strongest thing, I think, is the ridiculousness of it and the physical impossibility, which it appears to be.
Well, see, him describing the old lady having a goose walk, is related to there was a difference between her gait and a human gait. That's the main point.
There's a good question. What are the odds? What are the odds that Osman heard the Jacko story?
Very good.
I don't know. In the 1880s, it was 1886. I think the Jacko story was.
I can't bring it back, Steve. It's somewhere around that time.
Right.
It's very possible.
I would say it's very possible, because we heard about it almost 100 years later, right? And for him, living in British Columbia, Canada, that probably would have been like a story of interest. And don't forget that, you know, there was a lot of talk about Jacko prior to 1957.
Right.
When he released the story.
Right.
Do people talk about going to the toilet? Well, I don't know. He was very descriptive about a bunch of other things: how they eat, how they walk, how they communicate with each other, how they stand around, how they go ook ook, and stuff like that.
At the time, you know, that was kind of taboo. Just like, you know, women didn't show their knees and things like that. You know, women didn't show their.
And Pat, I hate to disagree with you, but his story is not plausible. Again, we have a Bigfoot taking the pack with him too, and taking in a sleeping bag, and he had his gun and his knife and all this other shit, and he decides not to escape for 6 days until his food runs out. Stupid. You know, I'd be an idiot. You know, I would. Reason you know what it is, Chris? The reason why we believe this shit is because if we were told this today, if somebody came out in public today and told us the same story, we'd be all saying bullshit. The problem is we've had this story ingrained in our head. And this is the final word on this. We've all had this story ingrained in our head for years, told by somebody that we elevate up in the field. And he believed them. All right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he signed an affidavit. Well, if he lied, big deal. What's that magistrate going to do? Come out there and arrest him? No.
Arrest him for lying about Bigfoot, right?
About Bigfoot. No, I'll never stand up.
Well, okay. I still like it. But do I like it as much as I did before? No.
Yeah. Because if somebody, you got to put it in present context. If somebody told us a story that they've, all this today, right? Somebody had told us tomorrow, the same exact story last week. Somebody comes out, I'm Marvin Pewterschmidt, and this is what happened to me. I got kidnapped by a Bigfoot, and it picked me up in my backpack, and we'd be saying bullshit. And all of you in chat would be saying bullshit. But the fact is that you were all raised on this story, so it's near and dear to the heart. And we need to get out of that line of thinking. We need to stop, look at these golden stories and put them and elevate them. We need to not do that. This is an investigation, and there is a lot of friggin' holes in this story. A lot of stuff that does not make any common sense at all. And if this story came out last week, we'd be all saying bullshit. Your bullshit meter would be going, right? But it doesn't on this. And why is that? Because it's something we hold near and dear to our heart. I get that. It becomes part of our belief system, not our rationale system. And on that note, one of
the things that Ostman described, not in the encounter, this was privately to John Green. And I'm going to bring this up, Steve. Ostman described the old man as being unfortunately and excessively under-endowed. The old man. Okay. Under-endowed.
What was that?
Ostman described in his account in a conversation with John Green about the old man, the male creature, being unendowed, very poorly endowed. Okay. We're talking about his prominent male feature was not very prominent whatsoever. Now, and I haven't said this.
Here's a retort to that, though.
Go ahead.
Okay. That happens in old people. That happens in old people naturally.
Very possible.
Not possible. Very possible.
Well, we're talking about Sasquatch speculation here now, okay?
No. I'm talking about primate speculation. Mm-hmm. In primate speculation, the older you get shrinkage, buddy.
With Ostman's account, he describes this.
And frankly, most primates are not well endowed either.
Gorillas. Look, gorillas.
They're not well endowed, no.
Right. Exactly.
Chimpanzees,
Now, at this point in time, Ostman would not have been able to notice if a gorilla was how he was packing or not. Okay,
but you can compare you can compare an old man and have the same frame of reference.
Yeah. With Ostman's account,
I'm sorry, it doesn't prove anything. He says, "Oh well, it wasn't well endowed." Well, next thing you know, if he said it was well endowed, it doesn't make a difference. It makes no bearing in this, because if you look at most old men, right?
Well, he's not. He just called him the old man. You know, it's not like he knew the age of the large male creature, the father figure of the bunch. So, but here's the problem with that. He gave his story in 1957.
And Mick says it was cold out.
After viewing a footage of natives in Africa shooting a gorilla from 1951 runs about. And you can find that footage on YouTube. It's there. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was footage of Africans shooting a gorilla with a high-powered rifle.
Right.
And it took several shots to bring it down.
But my concern is that Ostman was adding a lot of anthropocentrism into his descriptions of the Sasquatch. He was comparing them more to humans than anything else.
Yes.
Other than the fact. And that to me says that anything is on the board. He can make up whatever he wants to say.
Yes.
No, all of that's irrelevant. If it's a made up story, it's a made up story. Okay. He didn't talk about the lack of a neck. He didn't talk about any of them having a sagittal crest. He didn't talk about any of their eyes shining at night. He didn't talk about any long length of their arms. He didn't talk about their feet and how their feet made these flat tracks. That's what I have a problem with. Well, at least in the Bauman case, which was Teddy Roosevelt's story, they talked about the tracks pretty friggin' accurately.
Yes.
Right.
He did not go into detail about the tracks, right. But there were some descriptions, some physical descriptions he did make.
You understand when we grasp for things, because we have a belief system. We want to believe, so we look and we try to cherry pick, and that's natural. And that's something that I try to teach investigators not to do, because that's how you get tunnel vision. And that's what happens to a lot of people. The story is so near and dear. I'm not like that. I'm like, let me look, because when I got into this, I wanted to know the truth. I didn't care about what was held up there and what was not. And it was a cool story, but as I get older, I said I believed it as a kid, but I took all my childlike beliefs and threw them away. Yes. And wanted to reevaluate that. And I guess that's because Santa Claus wasn't real, the Easter Bunny wasn't real, the Tooth Fairy wasn't real, and that tree that grows money out in the backyard, my father always said money doesn't grow on trees. That was the truth. But anyway, we need to look outside of those things, stop and look at it as a whole. And if we understand that, he described about the twist, and he described something about that, he described something about that. Sure. But what didn't he describe? He didn't describe their foot. He didn't describe their anatomy that we have currently today, like lack of neck, such a crest, long arms, their foot structure or their tracks. Yeah. None of that.
Right.
How about the tapetum? Nothing about their eyes, nothing about eye shine, nothing of that we know today, that we see on a regular basis, that we've seen on a regular basis.
He did build a fire, so he would have had firelight there he could have saw the eye shine. So, but he never mentioned it. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Right. But I'm saying if we're going to cherry pick, Mick, what he did say that's accurate, let's take a look at the things he didn't say that are accurate. And there's more stuff that he left out than he would have if he was actually looking at a real Sasquatch. Yeah. What we're seeing is things that are mundane. Oh, they twist branches. Well, Jacko twisted branches. That was right there. That was the number one characteristic in the Jacko thing.
Yes, there were some things he described about the games that the young ones would play.
That story came out of the same area, British Columbia. Of course he would be familiar with that story. That was a legend, a local legend.
Yeah. So again, although this has been one of my favorites over the years, due to the descriptions of the creatures, the descriptions of the primate behavior with the young ones grabbing their knees and rolling down. Primates do that. Could he have learned about that later? Possible. If you're not there, you don't know if it happened or not. So that's the problem. But there are some issues with this story, though we were able to debunk some of the debunking. Some of the debunking has been debunked.
I'll explain why would he mention eye shine? Because the eyes reflect off of campfires.
Yeah,
and
that
that's been reported. And
orange
that's been
or
reported.
red.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it would have reflected off fires. Absolutely.
But you would think that is an important enough detail to have recalled when he recounted the story. His eyes didn't glow red, but the big guy, the creatures should have. So
the bottom line is that I'm just warning everybody, be careful what you cherry pick, because that's just the way, because there's amount, and I can see this, there's an amount of bias going on about this story.
Yes.
And me, I came into this, I ended up disproving a lot of that article about the whole immigration thing.
Right.
And but about certain other things.
There are still problems with the Albert Ostman encounter.
Correct.
That's what it boils down to. I don't think that they were successful in debunking it, but they did make some good points, and there are some things that are questionable.
Right, Mick, but Mick, I know, he says, well, Ostman may not have been familiar with a specific area. He could still be familiar with British Columbia.
That's true.
He specifically said he wasn't familiar with the area.
Yeah. And, one of the things when he claimed to have saw Mount Baker, okay, that could have been a misidentification. It's possible. But, if you give him that, then you're going to have to give him that he climbed 1,000 feet from the head at the head of Toba Inlet and was able to see 35 miles out in the bay. That's a little stretchy. I'm not certain.
And it's the whole point of people don't, like I was getting argued with about, well, J.W. Burns coined the term Sasquatch. No, he did not. That was a quote from the First Nations person. That wasn't something he coined. That was something he was told.
Steve,
so, we're a little over. Yeah, we're a little over. So,
but we could go on about this for another 2 hours, but let's give it. Okay, bottom line. I'm going to give you my bottom line, and then I'm going to hear yours, and then we're going to quit. Okay.
All right.
This is an encounter that is near and dear to my heart, and I would like to believe it. It's certainly well described, but there are a lot of problems with it, which when you start looking at the problems, if one of them doesn't add up, the whole encounter probably doesn't add up. And that's unfortunate. We can keep on giving, well, maybe he didn't see Mount Baker. Maybe he misidentified, saw another peak he thought was Mount Baker. Then we got to go back to the beginning of Toba Inlet. He climbs 1,000 feet. Could he see 35 miles out? No, he couldn't see the boats traveling out 35 miles away. No, that can't happen. So that's it. That's the big problem.
If we go down everything that's wrong with this story, like carrying a 90-pound sack, traveling 60 plus miles.
That's doable. Tough, but doable.
But not in the time frame. You got terrain. You got a 90-pound sack plus a rifle. You're going over mountains, through creeks, through, hollers. And you're going 62 miles, and you're doing that in a day and a half. You would make your escape. Ain't gonna work.
Well, running for your life, the benefit of the doubt again. He was running from his life for his life. He ate his grouse that he shot the head off with a 30-30. Whoa, wait a minute now. That's a problem. But it made him sick. He was sick to his stomach after eating his grouse. That rings true. His body had been pumped up on adrenaline. He was physically exhausted, and he was probably sick from the crash of the adrenaline. I don't think the grouse had anything to do with making him sick.
Otherwise, would have made him loosey-goosey.
Yeah. But, I love this story. It's one that's near and dear in my heart. But there are some problems with it, and I have to admit that there are.
Right.
But this was one of the great ones. So 100 years later, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah. Well, my final word, like I said, there's so many holes in this thing. I would love this story to be true. I really would.
Yeah.
But I'm not one to mince words. I think this is a tall tale. A lot of reasons psychologically going on that just don't make sense. A lot of convenience going on that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense with the topography he's stating. All right, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that, but all the rest of the stuff. And we have to be open to the fact that this may just be a BS story, which it seems like it is to me. Because if somebody came out, like I said, you want to put the litmus test to it. If somebody came out with the same story yesterday that you've heard for the first time today, everybody in this chat room, I would suspect, would be saying baloney. And that is my point. The story came out yesterday.
Jay says you can definitely see 35 miles from 1,000 feet elevation. Sorry, the story is still horses, but
right. Hold on, time out. But it wasn't 35 miles. It was 300 miles. 300 miles. They said it was like 100 kilometers.
Wait a minute. Oh, let me get an exact measurement, Steve. I want to see from. Oh, come on. Out there to the bay from the head of Toba Inlet.
Yeah, Mount Baker is over 100 kilometers to the east.
No. Mount Baker is 100 miles to the south, where he was at. But now the 35 miles
according
figure
to
was
the
out to the
BCSC, according to these guys, Mount Baker, from where he was 100 kilometers, which is 3.3 miles for a kilometer. That's 330 miles.
Yeah. From Toba Inlet, the head of Toba Inlet. But see, now, that's the thing. He wasn't at Toba Inlet when he saw Mount Baker. That's the thing. They're mixing up.
He said Osman said he saw Mount Baker in Washington State from the area near Toba Inlet, but it doesn't matter. The story's
that's 165 miles. 165 miles.
Right. So even
theorized, it would have been on the highest peak around, which would have been 100 miles away. Exactly. So, but yeah, the problem with the 35-mile deal was he was at the head of Toba Inlet 1,000 miles up, and he claims to have seen around 35 miles out there to the strait or the inlet where there was boat traffic and stuff. I don't think so. That's the problem. Oh my God.
Sorry, I got my kilometers mixed up with meters. Sorry.
All
right, guys, we're going to get out of here.
This has been a great show. We want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. If it's your first time watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you can't see the like button after you close the chat or something, hit the like button, depending on how YouTube's got this stuff figured out. We appreciate all you guys. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. Again, on the podcast, if you guys are listening, come over to the YouTube channel, Squatch-D TV, and check out some of the videos. This one especially, because we do have a lot of Google Map stuff on here you might want to look at for these locations if you're interested in researching the Albert Ostman kidnapping, Bigfoot Sasquatch kidnapping. But thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. And oh my goodness, Sasquatch Wizard Adirondacks. Oh my goodness. 19.
Oh, I appreciate that, sir.
Thank you so much. What a guy. Yeah. But again, thank you guys for hanging out with us. You're the greatest audience we could ever hope for, and we're honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Amen. All right, folks. Everybody have a great week. It's been very trying for me. But anyway, everybody have a wonderful week. Stay healthy, stay safe. We'll be back next Friday. The usual show, of course. Be looking out for the week for some long form videos and maybe a short or two, who knows. But anyway, we'll catch everybody next Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on SquatchdTV. Have a great night. God bless. And we'll see you all in a bit.
We thank you for being here with us on Squatch-D TV. If you haven't taken the time yet, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And oh yes, hit that notification bell too. We don't want you to miss anything. If you really like our content, you should consider becoming a member. And it's really inexpensive and a great way to support not only the show, but honest Bigfoot research. Everyone have a great week. Be safe and God bless. We will see you all here next time on Squatch-D TV. Keep on squatching.